Do you want to know how we make ourselves sick and how we make ourselves healthy? Of course you do, so keep watching, you're about to find out. Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another mastermind content tutorial. In this video, I want to share with you one of the tools from the mastermind content anxiety and depression program. This one, in fact. As you can see from the graphic, there is a path towards healthy integration and a path towards unhealthy debilitation. More precisely, the path towards healthy integration refers to the integration of the personality. In other words, unconscious content that has been repressed is allowed to be expressed. Because repression equals depression. Even if you don't have chronic anxiety and depression, you want to know about this tool because it gives you a visual overview of how we develop neurosis, disease, and debilitating disease. But more importantly, it shows you how to improve your health through synchronicity, self-awareness, self-development, which I will explain in another video. But let's first of all discuss how some debilitating diseases can develop. At this point, I should just stress that debilitating disease can emerge by other means as well from the external world, such as exposure to chemicals, toxins, dust, these things that we already know about. The type of illness I'm explaining here are the warning signs that are caused by psychosomatic factors. They are caused by repressed emotions. Now, you may have already heard that repressed emotions contribute to debilitating diseases, and one of the leading voices on this topic is Gabor Mate, who, by the way, I have a lot of time for. And in his latest book, When the Body Says No, Gabor writes, repression, dissociating emotions from awareness and relegating them to the unconscious realm, disorganizes and confuses our physiological defenses so that in some people, these defenses go awry, becoming the destroyers of health rather than its protectors. What Gabor is basically saying here is that repression can lead to ill health, but expression will give you optimal health. So it seems as though repression makes you ill. But the opposing energy of repression is expression, and that protects your health. My research led me to the same conclusion even before I did anything about Gabor Mate's work. So needless to say, I was very encouraged by the validation of an expert. But I'd also asked, if repression makes you ill, shouldn't we determine what repression is and how it happens? So to understand that, I turned to neurobiology, and there I discovered that the nervous system and the brain team up to deny aspects of your personality into conscious awareness via a process called dissociation. Now, dissociation is basically a splitting off of consciousness which buries part of your nature that is deemed unacceptable. It's part of your personality that is ignored by the ego and thus resigned to the unconscious. Now, this is what Gabor Mate means by disassociating emotions from awareness and relegating them to the unconscious realm. So let me give you a common example how these emotions or parts of your personality become split off and repressed. Let's say that when you were a child, you were angry or boisterous and your parents told you off, or they disciplined you in some way, or at least showed their disapproval. Now, in child logic, the disapproval of your parents makes you believe that anger is not an acceptable behavior. So to be accepted by your parents, to earn their trust, to earn their love, to earn their warmth, you have to suppress that anger. So children learn to suppress anger, and this becomes part of your personality that is repressed. Now, when more energy is repressed, it doesn't have the opportunity to develop, which means the part of your personality that energy belongs to
doesn't develop either. Now, here's the thing. Sitting on the same spectrum of energy as anger is assertiveness. Assertiveness is basically a healthy form of anger. It's constructive, whereas anger is destructive. Now, how many times have you wrecked a moment by getting angry because you didn't get what you want, or because you felt threatened or insecure in some kind of way? Passion is also the same energy as anger, which can also be healthy or unhealthy. So, let's say you have a passion for football, or you have a passion for acting, then that can lead you into a hobby or even a career that is fulfilling. But if your passion drives you towards addictive habits that become self destructive, such as excessive drinking or smoking, gambling, compulsive shopping, for example, buying things when you don't even have the money for it. All these things can be destructive. Now, I had an unhealthy passion for weed because it helped me to escape the mundane world and sparked my imagination. And I told myself the story that I needed this weed to be able to uh, write the books that I was at the time.
So I was smoking weed every day.
But suffice to say that my passion for weed did not end well, and that's a story for another day. For now, let's get back to anger. Did you know that repressed anger is linked with chronic heart disease, which incidentally is the leading cause of death in the West? So, this report, published by
Yale University. It indicates that stress and anger may exacerbate heart failure.
all these type of publications always say may in such a non-committal way, despite the fact that this evidence has been kicking around for more than 20 years, at least.
Like this study that was published in Circulation in 2000 that shows that anger proneness predicts coronary heart disease risk.
Several other studies since 2000 also show that anger and heart disease is linked, but these reports are ignored by mainstream media and they're not taught to medical students or mental health practitioners. Now, I'm not going to go into why this type of information is being ignored, but suffice to say, work by the likes of Gabor Mate and many other dissenting voices in today's medical arena
Show that a number of chronic diseases are associated with repressed emotions. So it's important to note that emotions that are repressed in childhood are not given the opportunity to express themselves, to develop, as it were. We therefore have to make the presumption that it is when an energy is in its undeveloped state or underdeveloped state, as the case may be, that there is more potential for an illness to develop. So it's interesting to note that the psychiatrist Jean Shenida Bowler noted that repressed emotions emerge in the same undeveloped state it was in when it was repressed. She wrote, whatever is dismembered and buried through repression is buried alive. When it's uncovered, it exists as it was.
So basically, when you have this raw energy that comes out as a complex, it is considered immature, it's not been matured, then you need to be looking at developing that aspect of your personality, otherwise, it could make you ill. So, dismembered basically is another way of saying repression. It's a split off portion of the personality that gets pushed into the unconscious. In other words, that raw emotion that you bury in childhood is not given the opportunity to develop, so it remains in an undeveloped state. And when you don't express these energies, they manifest as complexes, neurosis, and disease. Energy has to transform into something. So if the energy is not released into the outer world, it grows in the inner world, in your body.
What our tool shows is that raw energy, which is known as libido or vital energy, shows up in your personality first as a complex. And here we see it. Libido or psychic energy goes from a complex to a neurosis to a disease and finally to debilitation.
So let me explain how I see this working.
When emotions are repressed, part of the personality is dismembered or split off, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, the personality becomes fragmented because the archetypal energy is being denied access to conscious mind by the nervous system. The archetypal energy is not allowed to express itself. Thus, the result is an incomplete personality. It means you are not whole.
So isn't it interesting to note that the English word for whole has the same roots as the English word for healthy?
So you can see here from the online etymology dictionary that whole comes from the Old English hal, also the Old Norse heil, health, which means wholeness, being whole, sound, and well, also comes from the root word in Old English hal, meaning healthy, and the Old Norse heil.
That means if your personality is whole, you are healthy, but if your personality is not whole, it's fragmented, dismembered, or repressed, then you are unhealthy. And the unhealthy path leads to debilitating disease, which means that the archetypal energies you are repressing are making you ill. So, how do we prevent ourselves from treading the path towards debilitating disease? I should say at this point that this is only my opinion, just in case YouTube bans me for misinformation. So, from here on in, it's your choice. Make your own decisions. This is purely my opinion, but I want to tell you how I reached this conclusion. So, first of all, I'm going to refer you to the eminent psychologist Carl Jung because he identified that a complex is behind every neurosis. Now, Jung believed that a complex is
Divorced from consciousness, leading a life of its own in the psychic non-ego, and instantly projecting itself whenever it is constellated in any way, that is, whenever attracted by something analogous to it in the outside world. Jung also noted that a complex can be thought of as an archetype, energy that has been split off and projects from the unconscious onto the conscious mind and takes possession of the ego.
the ego may then identify with the archetypes in full, whereby it becomes conscious awareness, or partially, whereby it becomes a subconscious program and forms an undeveloped part of your personality. A personality that takes a life of its own, but you don't know why. Essentially, it's just a repressed aspect of your personality that is trying to express itself. Here's what Jung has to say on the matter.
Every split off portion of the libido, every complex, has or is a fragmentary personality. When we go into the matter more deeply, we find that they are really archetypal formations. They manifest themselves as personal agencies. In this form, they are felt as actual experiences and are not figments of the imagination, as rationalism would have us believe. Consequently, man derives his human personality.
Now, I know what you're thinking. This is all very interesting, but what is a complex exactly? Well, a complex can be identified in traits, emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, especially such as restlessness, frustration, anger, bitterness, loneliness, martyrdom, insecurity, to name a few.
So, what I'm saying is that a complex is a state of consciousness that you experience, but you're not actually consciously aware of why you're feeling a certain way or why you are acting in a certain way. What you are aware of is the thing in your environment that triggered the complex. So, you blame that.
Hands up if you've ever had an argument and don't know what you were arguing about. So admit this. Something set you off to get you started in the argument, but halfway through the argument, you realise what you're actually arguing about is so weak and tedious, it's embarrassing to admit it, so then you just throw in a load of other shit just to make up for it. And somewhere among that mess, you forget what you started arguing about. Now, what started the argument was your complex. Or how about this one? Have you ever woken up feeling moody or a little off and you don't know why? Nothing bad has happened to you, nothing different in your life. You might have even had an enjoyable evening the day before, but for some reason this morning you feel like shit. It feels like your insides have fallen out. And then you get moody, you get petty over nothing. When this happens to men, it's called the anima complex, but it happens to women as well. Well, the only explanation for it is that it's something in your archetypal energies. Or what about this one? Maybe you've acted out of character at one time or another. Then you find yourself telling your friends, oh, it's so unlike me. I don't know what came over me. Well, that was an archetypal energy emerging and taking possession of the ego.
It was out of character because that archetypal energy had not been part of your conscious awareness before. It's these little buggers that cause problems in our life.
So basically, what we're seeing here is thoughts, feelings, and behaviours that become part of your personality, but you're not sure why you act that way or why you say stupid shit. Yeah, we've all been there. Likewise, if you have repetitive experiences such as self-sabotage. Yeah, we've all been there as well. Well, this is an archetypal energy, or complex if you like, which has become a subconscious program. Now, most people are pretty aware that they're causing self-sabotage, but few people actually know why they're doing it. Sure, we blame the environment, but the truth is that you're missing a part of your personality that enables you to cope with the environment. So the solution is to recognize your complexes. And when you recognize your complexes, you'll identify your archetypes. When you identify your archetypes, you can integrate the healthy qualities into conscious awareness, develop your personality, and head off along the path of healthy integration. Hurrah! So a complex basically exists to draw your attention to the missing aspect of your personality, to that repressed consciousness.
So you need to be able to identify your complexes and the archetypes that they belong to.
This is essentially self-development. Therefore, don't ignore your unhealthy habits.
Or your complexes when they arise.
The more you repress your emotions, the more likely you are to develop a neurosis and then a disease and finally a debilitating disease. So if I just bring up this graphic again,
You can see the logical process towards debilitating illness has signal points, which starts with complex, to neurosis, to disease, to debilitating disease.
anxiety and depression, by the way, are neuroses.
Which means you're here.
You're already en route to unhealthy debilitation. Next stop, ding ding disease. So in the words of John Mayer, stop this train, I want to get off.
If you are carrying anxiety and depression, my recommendation is to address it now, before your health deteriorates any further.
Now, I'm not telling you this to alarm you. I'm not trying to be a scaremonger here. I just want to give you information that enables you to make an informed choice. Information that is based on scientific evidence. Whether it's ignored or not, it exists. And it exists for a reason. Now, I also know from personal experience that expressing repressed aspects of your personality not only helps you to fight anxiety and depression, but it expands conscious awareness across every other aspect of your life. Now, I've been involved in self-development for about 8 years now, and I've really transformed my life. It's a massive contrast since I had anxiety and depression, which basically made my mental health deteriorate to the point that I became a recluse. I started to have panic attacks and I felt so nauseous some days I couldn't even bear to face food, I couldn't eat. So this is when I decided to reach out for help, but conventional solutions did not help me one iota. So I did my own research and I found that the best solutions were actually almost a century old. For example, the Austrian psychoanalyst Wilhelm, so I just like to say Wilhelm like that, Wilhelm Reich, who was a contemporary actually of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, was saying this way back in 1927. Wilhelm wrote,
Repressed conscious becomes accessible to the condemnation of the mature ego. Since the unconsciousness of a desire is the condition of the symptom, making it conscious must produce a cure. So, fortunately, there is a way out of anxiety and depression, and that is to move towards healthy integration. In other words, to integrate the missing aspects of the personality which have been repressed rather than expressed, the aspects of your nature that have not been given the opportunity to develop into a state of maturity.
so to use the example of anger again, anger is an immature state and assertiveness is the mature state of this energy. So I trust all this makes sense and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to get notifications every time I publish a new video. And I'm going to be covering all 12 archetypes. And you won't want to miss that. So see you soon. Oh, and if you want to know what the synchronicity, self-awareness and self-development is all about, then I'll be covering that further down the line as well. Ta-ra. Oh,